Hello, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. This week we will be talking about the crypto platform Coinbase, and a hack/insider threat situation that may be costing the platform hundreds of millions of dollars to remediate. So, what exactly happened? A group of criminals allegedly bribed some of Coinbase's customer service agents into handing over personal customer data, like names, dates of birth, account and transaction information, phone numbers, images of identification forms like driver's licenses and passports, and partial social security number and bank account numbers. That stolen data allowed for the attackers to launch a series of social engineering campaigns, calling customers while pretending to be Coinbase. The attackers having actual information on the customers and their accounts made this only seem more realistic. Customers ultimately were tricked into sending funds directly to the attackers. This was eventually caught, and staff that were bribed into doing this were fired immediately, as, well, this is a very clear violation of data privacy and very likely some kind of company ethics and code of conduct that they are to follow. There was no business need to access this customer data at all, very clearly. Insider threats are actually one of the most common forms of threats, and in this case it was the employees purposely behaving in an unethical and unauthorized way. However, this is not the most typical example of an insider threat. Most insider threats are actually completely on accident. Think of someone accessing a document that was accidentally unprotected when it should have been, or someone emailing themselves a spreadsheet to their personal email, one that's not supposed to leave the organization, but the user just wants to look at it at home. Those types of things are unintentional insider threats. This was pretty obviously a compromised insider threat, though. Legitimate employees who worked at Coinbase but were bribed by attackers into handing over sensitive information. Sometimes a compromised insider threat can even come in the form of handing over access to sensitive systems. Now, I honestly can't imagine risking my entire career for a quick buck. It may be nice to get some extra money, but if I'm never able to find a job again, it very quickly becomes not worth the risk at all. Though some insider threats may be jaded or frustrated with the organization and do something like this as an act of revenge. It's possible, but currently we don't know enough to make that call here, and I do think just plain bribery is more likely in this particular case. This could have been the end of it, but Coinbase later received an email from the attackers, the ones who bribed their employees, on Sunday, May 11th, 2025, demanding a ransom payment of $20 million worth of Bitcoin, so that the customer data they had been given would not be publicly released. This kind of resembles a ransomware attack, but with no malware involved. There wasn't any kind of malware on Coinbase's systems, no info stealers. This data was handed directly to the attackers, but they still have that leverage to demand a ransom like this. Coinbase refused to pay this ransom, and instead decided to make its own offer, though not exactly one the attackers appreciated, most likely. $20 million in exchange for anyone who provided information that would lead to the arrest of the attackers. This is an incredibly uncommon response that has only happened a couple of times in the past. Usually, organizations don't put bounties on the heads of attackers. Bug bounty programs exist, but this is typically so white hat hackers can find flaws in softwares and receive a little bit of payment for bringing it to the attention of the organization so it can be remediated. I'm not sure if I've ever actually seen this happen, though. In a filing with the SEC, Coinbase estimated that it would have to spend between $180 and $400 million on remediation efforts. So why that much money? Though I can't get into literally all the math on how they came up with those figures, but I can say investment in new security training, potentially new implementations to monitor fraud more closely, and importantly, reimbursements played a pretty big role in getting this figure. Coinbase promised to reimburse all impacted customers that experienced losses due to this scam. And although that was less than 1% of their customer base, it's still a significant figure and is going to be a lot of crypto reimbursed. I'm actually really happy to see that Coinbase is reimbursing customers. Even though this was due to compromised insiders, they probably didn't have to do this. It would be a bit of a different situation if this was an actual bank and a fraud situation, but crypto exchanges don't really have any obligation to reimburse customers in the same way that an established bank does. Due to the very nature of crypto, many people who are scammed into handing it over never see that money again. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime. And I'd also like to thank AP News, Reuters, and Dark Rating for information on this case. I always find crypto-based crimes and insider threats especially to be really interesting, so I actually had a lot of fun researching this episode. And I hope you enjoyed it too. Until next time, stay secure.